All right, so good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be, and welcome to our Spring 2023 Developer Q&A with myself, Mr. Chips, and Kilrob.
All right, where do you want to take us and where do we want to start?
Well, let's just give a quick overview of what we're working on right now with the Supercharger update builds. Maybe we can show everybody just a little bit of a preview of how things work, especially some of the new stuff that we've already got working. Would be a good place to start. And then what we will do is we'll have a quick discussion of where the update will go from here, and then we'll open the floor up to questions from the audience.
So, what are we working on? Is a little bit of a revision of the reliability of the demographics. Pretty big change, pretty easy to do, but big change. And that is that we are pulling out reliability from being a integral desire of the demographic and making it a general desire of the demographic. One that never goes to zero. And you, the automation players, all know that you have been abusing the fact that some demographics don't care about reliability at all by just like putting ridiculous engines into your cars and then smiling all the way. And yeah, that's not going to be entirely possible anymore. Sure, you will be able to still sell your cars, but you will have problems with your desirability that way. So I think this will play a lot better than it previously did.
And of course, that's going to have a lot of changes with regards to how engines work as well, with our new engine block construction methods and power density.
That is exactly right, yes. So what is power density, Mr. Chips?
Well, basically what we're going to be doing is for certain engine block constructions, there's going to be essentially a maximum power that your engine can output before essentially you start overloading the block and just sort of the engine's overall construction. Now, it's not going to be like, if you exceed it, you're not going to go immediately to zero reliability and make your car, unsellable and whatnot. So those of you who like to make the crazy 10,000 horsepower BeamNG dragster cars, you're not going to be completely out of luck, but we are going to be, with different engine block constructions, there are going to be, varying levels of penalty with that.
So let me just load into a car and then share instead. So how about doing that now then? So let's head over to the engine, and that's at +5 quality, so maybe we can lower it a little. You see that quality does make quite a difference there in terms of where this dashed line is. So this is the power density that you're having at the moment, and power density just means how much power you're producing per liter of capacity. So turbo engines are the most prone to running into that limit. And let me make one real quick. So turbocharger there. Of course, always start by making your exhaust size much larger.
So we're just looking at the chat here, and we've got a couple questions come in. The first one here is from, actually it's a couple questions sort of the same, is that what happens when you actually exceed the limit? Does the engine just immediately break, or is it sort of like a smooth progression?
It's a very smooth progression that never ends in breaking. So basically it is as you are crossing the line with your blue power curve. So right now it's not being affected at all. But as soon as you're crossing that line, it very slowly drains your reliability. But then it will never actually fail due to power density. You will always be able to make a 10-second engine. So very low reliability, but it caps out at 75% reduction of reliability. And that makes it, of course, much better for those who are trying to do extreme builds. So extreme builds are still possible, but sellable is a different story.
Okay, well, that's a pretty good answer for that question. Of course, we've got from the chat one of the often asked questions, which is, can we have a higher redline possible in the game? And the answer to that is, unfortunately, no, we cannot.
Exactly.
It's not necessarily a technical issue, but the biggest problem is we just don't have the ability to generate sound beyond 12,000 RPM, and we don't really have a way to change that, unfortunately. If we could, we would have already.
And everything that we have been doing so far has been with 12,000 in mind. So even if it's not necessarily a massive technical challenge from a standpoint of game mechanics, it would be a massive change, and one that we don't want to make at this point. It's not just changing a number. It's not that easy, unfortunately. And yes, the sound is a major issue. So now you see that we are actually having an engine that doesn't explode, or does it? No. While being above the limit for our power density. So our power density is just under 500 horsepower, and we're at 635. But you see we're still at 64 reliability. This is still perfectly fine. You will see a degradation in reliability that way. But it is not so major that you can't go beyond or need to fear the limit. It's more a, please consider that your components are not properly made for this. And that's the same for the pistons. Right now I'm running a forged heavy piston. That's the one with the highest power limit. Almost has a very elite number right there for the power limit. Not quite. Missed a decimal. But if we go for a low friction cast, then everything explodes okay because of torque. Yes, that's another thing. But lightweight forged also explodes. But that one has a lower power limit than the heavy forged. You might be wondering, well, if there are two components, the blocks as well as the pistons, that are affecting the power limit, how is it then calculated? Well, it's kind of an inverse squared and then square rooted dependency. So in simple terms, it means that the weakest one counts the most. But if you have a stronger component in there are just two components, if you have one that is vastly stronger, then it will pull the value slightly upwards, but only ever so slightly. The worst component will still be the one that matters the most. You need to consider that these numbers at the moment are extremely preliminary. Like, the lightweight forged piston should not have exploded at that point. Although we are running a very beefy engine at the moment. 106 bore and stroke, that is a little hefty.
Yeah, that's a huge engine. My goodness. I think one of the questions we had come in just now was, obviously quality affects the level of your power density limit. Does the year that your engine is made in affect it as well?
Yeah, a lot. It does so a lot, yes. Let me pull that up to give you a... I pull up the spreadsheet because I love my spreadsheets. So this is now addressing the progression of power density over the years. So the way it works is, I assume you can't properly read all the numbers, so I'm going to basically explain a little bit what's going on. We have up here, the marked list there is the power density of the various pistons. And then we have the power density numbers for the blocks there. They are calculated together as described, so for the reliability penalty, and they are scaled with the year. So if we have a threshold value here, for instance, of 22, then, and we're saying that it's at zero quality and it's not a piston, it's a block, that would equate to light Alsi, for instance. If you were to build it, which isn't possible with that component, of course, if you were to build it in 1940, the threshold kilowatts per liter number would be 26.4 kilowatts per liter. And that is the threshold where the reliability starts to degrade. And the aboutish the midpoint there, they're just two values calculated, is at 55. While in 2020, if you try to do the same thing, the lower level is 81 kilowatts per liter, and the top, like 50% level, is way higher. It's beyond 200 here. So as you see in the table, 200 is there. and you still have 50% reliability at that point, and you can easily get to 80 kilowatts per liter without running into any kind of limitation there for your reliability. And if you go really beefy with this one, the HD billet is currently tuned to be 70, so I just put it in and the numbers will update, and you see that that one is quite a bit lightening things up, and you can go all the way to 250 kilowatts per liter. That's a hefty power number without it even noticing a reliability penalty. And you can go to like 700 kilowatts per liter. Yeah, good luck with that. And still have 44% reliability. So that's basically how the scaling there works. But if you were trying to do this in 1940, where of course the billet block doesn't exist, you would only be able to pull off 84, and you would really start to suffer at around 180.
So the question we had come in is about the torque, the power limit, sorry. Is it based on engine family capacity, or is there any further effect that you have by changing your engine variant parameters?
So it is based on family capacity, but then also on your upboring choice. What you're going to see here now that I have some more reasonable values for bow and stroke. Oh, my turbo engine is naturally aspirated. Means the turbos are slightly too large, slightly racy. So anyway, we do have the limit there. Check out what happens if I go to the maximum. 90 for this one. It dropped to 208. And here we have 250. So it's a big difference there. It's like, what was that? 20%. It's 20% difference. So if you're upboring, if you're using all your upbore, you're going to lower the power density of your block because you're destabilizing it. So that's another thing that you need to compromise on. And a really solid engine block, like if you lower the slider, will actually continuously climb in that value, slightly at least. The stronger you make the block, the higher the power density limit will be.
Yeah, and any questions? So we got the one question, of course, that everybody's asking about. Will we be able to twin charge our engines when the Supercharger update proper in Elrilma comes out? And the answer to that is yes, we are investigating that, and it should be a possibility.
And that is correct, yes. That is entirely on me. So if you don't see it, you can blame me for it. But I need to figure out the calculations for twin charging. But that is basically the same thing as... I should go to that page. That's basically the same thing as doing a two-stage setup. And we already have the UI set up for that. It's currently partially hidden because we only have one stage. But if sequential turbochargers are being worked out, well, we are going to have two-stage turbos. Then just switching out one stage to be a supercharger should be basically the same as it being a turbo because the output parameters are the same. So, yeah, you will be able to have stage 1 be a supercharger, and then you can add on a turbocharger for stage 2. Or, well, or 2 turbochargers, depending on what you need. I don't know. Are there any setups for that? No, we only ever have one supercharger, right? I think so.
Yeah, I believe what we're going to be doing is just having
just one and one
supercharger possible.
Yeah. At that point, people necessarily will be asking, but can you up the maximum size for turbochargers because it's not enough? And I don't know what the answer to that is just yet. I don't like the prospects of it.
Yeah. And I should add on to that as well that even though there have been cars in real life that have had 2 superchargers in them, the reason why they had 2 superchargers is at the time there didn't really exist a supercharger large enough to feed them to the level that the manufacturers wanted. But that won't be an issue with automation because we're going to give you very generous limits on the size of your supercharger.
That is correct, yes.
Let's see here. I have a question about, is pre-chamber injection ever coming to automation? And the answer to that is almost certainly not. The reason being is that it's such a niche technology, It's not really something that's appeared in anything other than one road car, at least on the gasoline side. And since we're not going to be adding diesel engines in any time in the foreseeable future, and probably ever, that's not really a technology that we're going to be having in automation.
Yes, I have nothing to add to that. It is something that you also pretty easily can fake with quality slider. If you are trying to replicate something, I know it's a lame answer, but it's still a true answer. So you have to eat the lame. And that is just like, yeah, okay, add 4 points of quality if you think that's about it, what it would do. And in most cases, that is actually pretty accurate.
Yeah, and especially with how tech pool is done now, it's going to plus 15 quality. I mean, it's expensive still, but it's not going to be absolutely, utterly game-breaking like it was in 4.1 and before. So another question is, and this has come up actually a couple of times, is with regards to parasitic losses for superchargers when they show up. Will they be calculated, and how will they be affected by quality? I think this is actually a pretty straightforward answer here.
Yeah, very straightforward. Because, of course, yes. Otherwise, superchargers would be just super OP. Like, just imagine superpowers not having their main disadvantage. Like, what world would we be living in? A world where every car is supercharged. Would you like that world? You probably wouldn't.
I think it'd be pretty cool.
Like, free magic power, awesome. Yes, all the boost. But no, of course it's going to be simulating the parasitic losses from there. And of course quality is going to lower it. And just like quality effects, while we are on screen here, go to the turbo grid one and get a larger compressor map. You see that quality drastically affects the compressor map. And let's go to something big here, yes. Pressure ratios and everything. That will be the exact same for superchargers. So you are going to be able to affect your compressor map. And also, of course, then friction in the system.
I mean, that is sort of the key defining characteristic of superchargers, that, how much parasitic loss they generate for the engine and, through the belts and whatnot. That's kind of their defining characteristics, so it would make a lot of sense to have quality affect it pretty significantly. We have a question come in about what kinds of superchargers are we going to have in the game. So we're actually going to have 3 types of superchargers. We're going to have the roots type supercharger, centrifugal superchargers, and also the twin screw supercharger. So basically all of the major types that have been put on cars in the last 60 or 70 years. Okay, here's a good question for you, Rob. What is the in-game distinction going to be like between a root supercharger and a twin screw type supercharger?
Oh, that's an excellent question, which I cannot answer at all because I have not done any research on any of that stuff just yet. So there will be differences. How they are expressed in game, I don't know yet. Probably they will have, from just thinking about it briefly, they will probably have some kind of different types of compressor maps. There's some nuance in there. And they will have different parasitic losses in different ranges of operation. I don't know. I haven't done any of the research for that yet. That is partly what Andrew is going to present me with, and then I start building models out of that data. That's usually how it goes. And before I even get into that, I will be figuring out the sequential turbochargers. That needs to be coded up in my prototype builds. But yes, if there weren't significant changes between those, we wouldn't have them in game. So that's going to be somewhat thoroughly modeled, I would think.
So here's an interesting question, Rob, and it's not necessarily related to the supercharger update build. It's actually sort of just related to automation in general. And that question is, do you have anything you feel guilty for wanting to put in the game but know that you can never add?
Oh, that's a good one. I really would love to have proper aerodynamics in game. But I know that's just not feasible. And it would have all kinds of consequences that we don't want there to be. So let me elaborate on that. So first of all, to make something that is better than what we have, we would have to have a proper flow dynamics simulation with where you just subdivide the profile of the car into small cubes. The finer the better, and the more computing heavy. And then you're simulating input-output into those little cubes, just flowing around the car. So a proper simulation for that. And that would then calculate you a dynamic CD value. And that would mean that fixtures you put on there actually make the car more draggy. And you would be able to properly simulate lift and downforce, of course. And that would all be super cool. I would love to tinker with that myself, but I know that it's a prospect that is that's just out there. That's more something that BeamNG would do in more detail if they could than what they already do. Theirs is of course much more advanced than ours, our aerodynamic model. But yeah, that would be something that would be really cool. But it's just that would probably delay the game. Just that system would probably delay the game by a year. So yeah, do you want to have proper aerodynamics in the game and be $500,000 poorer? Or would you just like to continue on? It's basically that. So yeah, it's not going to happen.
So the other question, this is maybe a little bit further on in the engine, actually in the car designer, Rob, is with respect to the new all-wheel drive systems.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So will the adjustments to our all-wheel drive systems include different performance in inclement and poor weather driving surfaces?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let me show you something. I have something prepared in spreadsheet. So let's go back to my beautiful dependencies spreadsheet. Also, that by the way is quite fun. You see the row number there, right? This is just a tab in this massive collection of spreadsheets, and this one is sitting at row 3600. And in this one, I'm modeling all the dependencies. Like here you have, for instance, the new gearing, where you can just put in the numbers for the various sliders and it spits out the calculations and so on. And now I'm going to show you, if I scroll to the right point, this is auto manual stuff. Now, yeah, CVT calculations, differentials balancing. Here, there we are. So this is part of the differential system. And your answer is right there. So let me go through that to give you the gist of it. This new system is, if I can find it myself, where it starts, right here. So basically what we're going to do is, your car has a set diff setup that you have defined. And what is being done is that it calculates how much grip you have for each wheel in perfect conditions. And then it goes through various calculations that determine how much torque you can put through to the tires. But these tests are very varied, and they depend on the compound of your tire in combination with the current weather of the test. And there are, how many are there? That's 10. 10 different driving situations. So the first one here, for instance, is even grip all around. So the baseline. Then you have slightly less grip overall, and one wheel has half the grip at the front. And the next one is the same thing, but with one wheel on the rear having half as much grip. And then you go through the list, and then you have stuff with less grip overall, 3/4 on the right rear, and 1/8 on the right left. And they're just testing all kinds of combinations. And then one wheel in the air, or no grip, like on a patch of ice or whatnot. And then 2 wheels in the air, and 2 wheels in the air, and one of them is on the front and one is on the rear. So there are all kinds of tests. These are then, for the different stats in the game, split up into being used in different ways. For instance, for the test of the sportiness stat, that is going to be a multiplier, act as a multiplier to your sportiness stat, we are running test ID 1, which is even grip all around, in dry conditions. So then it goes and looks up, okay, dry conditions means blah here for the various tire compounds. In dry, everyone has a factor 1 if it's oh no, these are dry tires, sorry. The dry factor 1 here, weather grip multiplier. If it's muddy, then it's 0.25. It's ice and snow, it's 0.1 grip multiplier. But here for sportiness, we only care about dry and wet conditions. And you see there are 8 tests run on this. Then, various tests, and then they are averaged for the results. And all these tests are for sportiness, are pretty standard road or track conditions. If you go to drivability, on the other hand, you have a few muddy conditions as well, a few conditions with ice and snow, where you have severe loss of grip on various tires. For off-road, you have extreme tests where you are up in the air with some wheels as well. That makes a big part of the stat. And basically everything is run on mud, just to make that a bit more effective as well. And all these are being averaged for the respective stat and then multiplying that stat. So there is a significant difference between for the different stats between what differentials you choose, and they will have a large effect on there because for instance, the torque bias ratio, if you put a viscous diff on there, would be like 2, and if you just switch that out for torsion, with a torque bias ratio of 3.5, you will see a massive gain in terms of capabilities for drivability, for instance, where you just can put so much more power down on the road in bad conditions specifically. I think that long-winded answer kind of explains it, that yes, it's going to matter.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be quite complicated, sort of the stuff that's going on behind, but it's going to be a much more accurate representation of what all-wheel drive systems are actually like in the real world, instead of just saying, okay, here's your all-wheel drive system, and then there's basically nothing else that goes on with that. And it's just some magical stat improver with really no further thought.
Yeah, so far the diffs were just flat stat multipliers. There were slight advantages to like 0.5% extra drivability. But why? And in what conditions? Well, it didn't matter. And also to make things even better with the system, this kind of calculation, not the running 20 tests for each stat and so on, but rather looking at how much torque is actually delivered to the wheels, that is going to be put into the track calculations. And the track calculations will be possible to run live as well. So those would be considered for every time step then, and really checking how much grip do you have and how much power can you put on the road. And that is where you are going to see differences in track performance between open diffs and the various other types.
So we've had a few questions come in while we were chatting about CVTs specifically and their behavior.
Right.
So the question is, are we going to just have a straight CVT without sort of the fake shifts that a lot of manufacturers seem to like putting in their CVTs? And I'm going to say we're just going to have, your engine is going to go right to its maximum power and it's going to stay there. There's going to be no fake shifting, because there's really no benefit to that other than making the consumer feel good. Giving them a little sneaky blanky.
Realistically, it should, if you had that option in the game, it should up your sportiness value slightly from it being utterly trashed. Like, you first cut it by 50% and then you add that feature in air quotes and it goes up to just being trashed by 40% instead of 50%. So no, exactly. But no, that is it is a ridiculous concept. It is basically handicapping the engine from working properly. So no, we're not going to put that in because it's not optimal. And if you want to have a CVT, then you need to accept that it's a CVT. So this is a CVT calculator here, and I've shown you in game already in the little dev update how it behaves. But you can see basically we're doing two calculations. One is for the RPM for cruise mode, like here you have a speed in kilometers per hour, for instance, and then the RPM that you would be seeing while in a cruise throttle setting. And you see that it's trying to hold peak efficiency RPM, which is, for this test case, 1,900 RPM. So it tries to hold that, and then when it runs out of speed ratio, like that's the gear ratio, so to say, that's called speed ratio, I believe, then you are seeing that it then has to increase its RPM to actually be able to continue accelerating or be faster. And for the in the power mode, it just wants to go straight to peak power, which in this test case is at 5,700 RPM. But of course, it needs to be able to get there first with its speed ratio. So you see here, only from in this very specific example, only from 20 kilometers onwards, 20 kilometers per hour onwards in speed, you would be able to actually be there at peak power RPM, and then hold it until 220 kilometers an hour. So that will be a whole lot of right?
Yep, exactly. The next question is, what are the power losses going to be like with CVTs? Is it going to be similar or to automatic transmissions or more? And how will that compare to the automatic transmissions? Manual transmissions.
Okay, so manual transmissions in-game are currently listed as having no loss, which of course isn't true, but it's our starting point, our base point, basically. And we haven't tweaked any of these values. Let me see, where do I have them? Currently, the listing is as follows. We have those here, power transmission. 1 for manuals, 90% for slush boxes at the moment. For advanced automatics, it's 95%. Auto manual 100%, dual clutch 100%, sequential 100%, and CVTs 98% at the moment. These values are subject to be tweaked as we get more information about them, as we do more research on them, and so on. And here you, by the way, do see all the stat multipliers and see that CVT for sportiness is the suckiest of sucky gearboxes. But for comfort, it is really quite good. And for drivability, of course.
So this is a question that's probably more appropriate for a BeamNG exported car with a CVT rather than in-game and automation is, will we have a speed limiter put on for the CVT car when they go into reverse? So for automation, that's not really something that's important in automation because we don't really do any calculations with reverse gears.
That's true.
But for a BeamNG car, that's definitely something we'll have to look into. I will say that even today, most CVTs actually use a proper gear for reverse. So it'll have some sort of a fixed ratio, I think. Probably with some other dependencies, I think. Of course, have we even looked into that, Rob?
No.
With how that works with exporters?
No, not at all.
Okay.
At least I haven't. Maybe Infinity has? Not sure.
Yep. And Infinity's in our chat right now, just chatting away with you people merrily, so he might have a bit better answer for you with regards to that. Let me just scroll back here. I saw a good question here a moment ago. It's from Andy D, actually. It's 2 questions. And one of them was pertaining to his rather unfortunate performance last summer in the crossover challenge that we did. And that is with respect to the track calculations, have we actually fixed the drivability and sportiness wonkiness that was going on there?
Not yet, but those changes are, of course, coming before we... they are going to be part of the new track calculations that we are going to work on for the various 4.3 iterations. So the Ellisbury update will already have a revision of that. At least that's on my list of things to do. Because, yes, it was very exploitable and bad.
Yep. And for every person who did actually exploit it, we had a couple of people. And Andy was one of them. And there's another person who really got punished by them because they were sort
of funny.
right on the edge of like a sort of an asymptotic value. And if they went to a track that had really rough surfaces, all of a sudden their really fast car was just a complete disaster. A question comes in, when are CVTs actually going to unlock in the game?
Well, that's a little bit open for debate, but at the moment we have it set to 1985. Let me quickly go there for the unlock years. So, yeah, right. So currently we have the unlock years as 1985, but I know there were CVTs in the 70s as well. But the question then is, should that be a thing that unlocks that early? Because that was kind of one of a kind at that point. If we find stuff where it was, which points to it was common knowledge before then, we are only going to punish them by being awful in the early years, which is perfectly valid, I think. As soon as you can make them somewhat viable, at least for really small engined cars, then, which might be in the 70s, then yeah, you can go for that. Let me see if I have that. No, that's the wrong direction. If I have some more data here. Yes. Right, so the main limiting factor for the CVTs, of course, is the torque limit that they will have. The soft torque limit as well as the absolute torque limit. And currently, these are all current values. They're subject to change if we find better data for them and so on, right? Here we have the CVT listed in an example. I've currently set the engine capacity to 1 liter. So you see basically the torque per liter it can take at the moment. Because there are two limiting factors that we are implementing for CVTs in terms of torque. And that is the absolute torque limitation and a scaling with size torque limitation. And the absolute torque limitation for the 1980s will be around 150 newton meters. So if you put anything on there, an engine that has more than 150 newton meters, you will see reliability penalties shoot up. And the torque per liter isn't that great either with 50 newton meters per liter. Yeah, that's not great, is it? In fact, it's really bad. Because at that point, your good engines would be around 90-ish newton meters per liter.
So here's a question that is not really related to the update, but the question is, how big is the team working on automation? Well, I can answer that. We have, 13 people who are full-time employees of Camshaft, Rob? Or contractors?
Yes, I think that's the roundabout number. A little bit, like 12, 13, yeah. That's about right. Out of which we should talk about the splits in there as well.
Yes. Not everybody works on automation.
No, and, well, kind of right now, actually. So we do have, I think we have 3 dedicated programmers right now for automation.
Yes.
Yes.
That is correct.
And then we have the one designer you're talking to at the moment, doing all the systems for the game. And then we have our prototyping developer, Mac, who is not working on the Mac version, because that is Matt who is doing that. But he is working on the standalone track editor at the moment. And that's going pretty well. So that's going to be awesome once we have that. And that is something that I'm really looking forward to, by the way. And the rest are pretty much artists and Mr. Chips. So that's that.
Yep.
And of course, Infinity on the exporter.
Yep. Then we also have 3 or 4 contractors as well who design bodies for us as the need arises. But they're not really. I mean, they are employed by us, but they're not full-time developers on automation or the cyclist. So we got a question coming in about the engine dyno graph.
Yes.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about some of the changes that are coming there, Rob.
Okay. So currently we don't really have anything. You see, I'm so ill-prepared that I don't even know where that damn dyno chart is. So here, there's nothing new on this page at the moment, apart from these 2 that you see here. Throttle and RPM, current throttle setting and RPM target. And if we go in there... Has Isaac already updated this? I think it's very close to actually having values hooked up to them. But let's see. Yeah. This was the first time I'm trying it out myself, so okay. Let's see. So we give it a little bit of... Oh, that's already working. Oh, that's cool. Okay. So you set your throttle. It doesn't give you a value just at the moment. And can set your RPM target as well. So basically a load and RPM target. And then you can really see how your turbocharger behaves as well for different throttle settings. It isn't hooked up here yet to the gauge, to the boost gauge. So that is something that is extremely work in progress. But you also see how much... okay, it limits you to only allowing throttle settings that leave you with some power. Right, 1.4 horsepower. That's enough, isn't it? But yes, so this is part of the change. The rest of the major change will be that there will be a lot more gauges and information about current engine statistics. Instead of having this engine statistics panel here, we're going to give you more data on what is actually going on in the engine instead of just metaphorically, or however you want to put that, for within the game in terms of stats. So lots more data being shown there as you go through the RPM and throttle settings. So I hope that partially satisfies the questions.
So the one question we've had come up just recently here, a couple of ways, is how can we support the continued development of automation? Well, there are a few ways you can do that. First one is, if you want, you can buy the V16 supporter pack or the soundtrack. We do get some money for those, obviously.
It has to be said that if you purchase the soundtrack, all profit from that goes to the composer directly. So if you want to support awesome music made for the game, then do that. And if you want to support us, then it's the V16 supporter pack.
Yep. And I should say you should definitely give some support to our composer, Michael, because he's he's done fantastic work for us. And we are very appreciative of the work that he's done. The other big thing that you can do for us is, just tell your friends about the game and make sure you leave reviews on our Steam page as well, because those always help with our visibility to a degree. We have a couple BeamNG exporter questions. One of them actually came in quite a while ago. The first question is, are we ever going to have the ability to export just engines to BeamNG and not having to send them in full cars? And are we going to have more settings in terms of transmission tuning in BeamNG? That's basically just sort of the two questions.
All right.
I think those are more sort of infinity questions.
No, the first one is more overarching than that. The engine-only export has been discussed with the BeamNG team, with the leadership of the BeamNG team, and they are all for it. It is just something that we have not gotten around to. And as far as I know, the BeamNG team is way too busy this year to be working on any bigger collaborations, unfortunately. So this will be something that is a feature that we want, but one that will have to wait. And for the transmission stuff, and now that you can set everything up in automation much more in detail, I don't quite know what you want from that more over what we have.
Yeah, that's a pretty fair answer. And yeah, I should say that, in my talk with the part of the BeamNG team that I have, these guys are very busy on some very interesting features. Can't say anything about that because it's obviously not our place to do so. But they've got their work cut out for them in the next 18 months or thereabouts, it looks like. So we have a question. Are we going to ever attend events like SEMA or PRI in the future? And the answer I can give to that is, we periodically look at these sort of things and see what kind of cost to benefit there is. And currently we haven't really found that there's the benefits outweigh the costs. Because, it's really cool to go to these events, and I think it would personally be a lot of fun to go to some of them, especially on company time. But how much of a benefit would we actually get, seeing as it is fundamentally a very kind of localized type of event? We can affect and get our word out to more people more efficiently just by doing our stuff online, generally. Another question, how feature complete do we consider the BeamNG exporter?
We consider it functional for the most part, and definitely not feature complete. I think that's a fair answer. It's always going to be further improved. And of course, BeamNG is also a moving target, because they are changing things, they are improving things. So there are more possibilities for us as well as that development goes along. And yeah, as such, it's not going to be considered complete until after the game is done.
And I think to add to that, the BeamNG exporter probably can't be considered feature complete until not just automation is complete, but also BeamNG is complete.
Which is also a pretty long-running project, isn't it? So it kind of seems familiar.
Yeah, BeamNG has been in early access on Steam for, I think, only a couple months less than us, actually. I think it's July of 2015 versus May of 2015 for us. So both projects have been very long in early access. And in Beam, it's going to be a long time still before they reach 1.0. It's like the dwarf fortress of car simulations. More questions with regards to what are future plans for DLC once automation is complete?
I think the answer is very well covered by the FAQs there. That is,
yes.
Basically we are considering 2 engine packs that are small engines and large engines. And I think we do have the sounds already for those, but of course not the artwork. And that is going to have to wait until the game is done. And that would be reasonably quick to make. Like maybe 2-3 months worth of work per engine pack. So it's looking pretty good. High chances that is going to happen after the game is done. And then beyond that, we really have to see what situation we are in and so on. But at the moment, it's looking pretty solid.
And that actually kind of pertains to a question that was just asked, is what year do you think automation is going to transition away from being early access? And the answer to that is, we actually discussed it in the little dev update very briefly, but once the Supercharger update cycle is complete, which will probably be, well, the very earliest it could be is probably 12 months, but probably more like 18 to 24 months is when we finally get these 3 updates out and fully updated. Automation, the car designer, is actually going to split off, and it will be considered feature complete, and it will move out of early access. And the campaign mode will transition to a DLC. Everybody who's purchased automation before a certain date, and that includes everybody here, will have that DLC provided to them free of charge. And that is where the development will focus on the campaign mode. Anybody who buys automation after that date will have to buy the base game and the DLC for the campaign mode on top. And the interesting thing as well, it's something we're putting some thought into. Ties into the DLCs, is that there will probably be, or we are evaluating the possibility of a sustainment effort post 1.0 release for automation beyond maybe the 2 DLCs that we've already done. It really depends on sales and depends on a lot of other things. So we can't really promise anything in that regard, but it is something we will consider.
So the main thing why we are considering doing it like this, as in finishing up the core of the game, calling that one in air quotes done, while continuing to support it, of course, and then working on the campaign as a split-off DLC, which everyone already has, who bought the game before that point, is mostly because it's a much better value proposition for those who are coming over from BeamNG, who only want to build cars and don't care about the tycoon part. There will be, of course, more tycoony things put into Sandbox as well, as you already have some parts of the sales model available in that mode. And if I head over here to the statistics, detailed stats, markets, there we go. So you already, am I sharing that screen? Yes, I am. Cool. So you already have sales numbers in here, and you can set your prices and so on. So there's a hint of that going on. And what also will be part of this is likely this new explanation of that sales model. And I think that is enough of a tickle towards the player that, oh look, there's a tycoon game that might be fun underneath the surface if they are willing to look at a screen like this and actually find it enjoyable. They will likely find the tycoon mode enjoyable as well. So that is how we're going to convert those players over to tycoon as well. But I think it's just a much more solid value proposition overall. If you are coming from BeamNG, you buy the game for the car designer and engine designer, for the multiplayer mode, maybe, because it is at that point going to be that finished game with multiplayer in it. So there is more than just the designers, more than just the sandbox. You don't need the campaign at that point to be having fun in automation, because not only is there multiplayer, but also all the scenarios are going to be back. And so single player scenario modes and the tutorials, of course, and then all the multiplayer stuff in it as well. So there's a lot of fun to be had in this core experience, and then adding the campaign on top is just really nice, and of course a bigger feature. And that allows us then to properly focus on the campaign development as well. But for that to be started in the first place, we need to have a feature-complete core of the game, so that everything from there flows into campaign.
And really, I think it can be said that campaign mode development, what we've seen so far, is really just scratching the surface of what we're planning. Really, it's just testing out some... Effectively, the light campaign is just testing out sort of the very basic bones upon which we're going to build pretty much everything else.
Yeah, although I would say that the biggest changes will likely be in UI, as well as how well explained everything is. Because you I think players right now are really struggling to understand what's going on for very good reason, and that is just that the game doesn't explain itself well. So there's a lot more direct feedback that is required from the UI to the player to make this a fun experience. Because if you're just poking in the dark and trying things and just get seemingly random outcomes, that's not fun. That's not fun gameplay. And we're very well aware of that. So those who understand what is going on in campaign, they have loads of fun with it. Believe it or not, they have loads of fun with it. And we want to bring that to a much, much larger percentage of players. But also, of course, add features to it. And some of the main features that we are going to add, of course, are the engineers and their effects, so that you really have kind of a legacy. But also, what is something that has been called for a lot, and that is planned into the updates. I think I talked about that already in 2020 there, with the big overview update there, that 5.0, 5.1, 5.2 in the old number system is dedicated to really bringing out the flavor of the campaign by being able to see your competition. Because that is currently you're competing with spreadsheets, and I mean, I love spreadsheets, right? They are very handy, but even that love knows its limits, if you can believe it. And I would like to see my competitors. Like when I'm clicking here, it says competitors gained 12.2%. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's nice. Very informative, Kilrob, thanks. But that's not immersive, is it? Really not. So the overall goal here is to bring your competitors to life. There already are competitor companies, and I can probably show you just briefly that under the surface there is a lot more brewing than you think there is from just looking at campaign the way it is at the moment. So let me jump back into... how did streaming go? Yeah, thanks. Pretty well. you do have the beautiful spreadsheet here that is the buyer demographics simulation, and you see spreadsheets because you love them. And in there, hidden in one of those many tabs, is, let me see, company generation, company profiles. So all companies that exist in a game at the moment, and those are all of these. How many companies are there? That is 37. 37 different car companies that are in the game. They have different profiles for what cars they want to produce, and they are going to build models and trims with all that in mind, looking at synergies between them and so on. So there is a properly fleshed out competitor car building AI that doesn't build cars live while you play, but rather has pre-built cars that are being generated with their AI, with their kind of company profile and what they want. Now what's coming is also that they are going to have tech pool that is specific to just them, and they have a big lineup as well. And now that we are going to open up the black box that is the sales model, you're already going to see which company out of those here, currently aptly named Family Small 5 Fruinia. That just means, well, they're focusing on small family cars, and they have a size of 5, which means generally trying to keep up 5 different models at the same time. And they are based headquarters in Fruinia, which is important for unlocks of different regions. Those, by the way, you might think, but I'm not a campaign player, I don't care. These are all in Sandbox, so you do care, a little bit at least. You are going to be able to see them in Sandbox as well, if all those changes pan out as we have planned. But the ultimate goal here is to be not only able to see, trim X called the Eagle, the Eagle Mark III has gained like 3% market share compared to my 1.2. Why is that? You click on the car, you actually get all its stats as well as what the car looks like. And now you're asking, like, okay, how is that supposed to work, right? And what we are planning to do is some kind of curated, community-submitted car designs for different types of cars, for different eras, and so on. And out of those, at the start of the campaign, for the selected cars, those designs would be chosen and hopefully not repeat, so that you do have unique designs to look at from the competitor companies. And they will pop up in your newsfeed as well. Like, they just beat your butt in this category. New best car in one of your main target demographics from competitor X. And you see the car and you can click it and see its stats. It's like, oh my god, how did they manage this? I have to beef up my lineup there. And I think that will be bringing the campaign to life and to a whole different level. Because right now, as people rightfully say, it's basically a spreadsheet simulator. So it's a game for me. But not for everyone.
Yeah. I should say that as we get to the point where we're going to be doing, getting designs for these campaign competitors, there are going to be a number of community events that are going to be running with regards to that. So that should be quite fun for everybody. Although I think we'll do a little bit better job of judging than we do at the official design competition, don't you think, Rob?
Yeah, probably. We have learned a lesson or two, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have. Here's a question that came in quite a bit earlier that I unfortunately missed. And that is with regards to the updated engine sounds that we had a couple people working on during the 4.2 update cycle. And that is, will they be appearing in the Supercharger update?
Oh, that's a good question. I have not been following up on that at all. So you might have more knowledge of that than I do.
To which I would say, I haven't particularly been following up on it either, but it is something that we are going to investigate. Engine sounds are always something in automation it's always been a troublesome area for us, because it's sometimes, we make a change and it makes some people happy, but then, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks later, somebody else comes in and said, why did you change this engine sound? It sounds awful now. I don't like it. So on and so on. So it's something that we need to obviously do with a little bit of care and attention. And also, like our engine sound system it's useful, but it really doesn't have a huge amount of customization possible, unfortunately. It's really basically just changing, basically how loud is the engine sound, through various parts of the rev range. And you can't really change the bass sound a huge amount. You're basically just sort of changing the mixing, as the engine RPMs climb through the various ranges of sound. So we are always investigating new possibilities for sounds, but I mean there's some pretty pie in the sky ideas we've had with regards to that, but nothing really concrete we can share about that, unfortunately.
And yes, we have talked with Ange. That was the first thing we did as he came out with his first video. As it had less than 5,000 views, we had already talked to him on Discord. So rest assured that pathway has been explored.
Let's see here. There's actually a very good question that oh yes, here it is. It's going to be about multiplayer. And what is that going to entail and how is that going to work? Well, there's going to be quite a few things actually with the multiplayer. Some of which we can't really talk about. But what we can talk about is, and this is something that any of the really old timers would remember back in the Key Engine days, is we had a multiplayer scenario challenge, and that is how multiplayer worked with automation. So what you do is you'd get together with a number of players in an instance of automation, and a scenario for the engine designer would be created. So you had to design an engine that had X amount of power, or X amount of efficiency, or had a displacement above a certain value or below a certain value, or was limited to a certain kind of fuel. And depending on what the game master chose for you, you'd have a certain amount of time to design the engine in. If it was 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, etc. To really make the challenge challenging, you might only have a limited amount of testing data available. So you could start the engine in some cases. And in the most extreme case, you would have one engine test. So you'd have no data for the engine being put out to you as you went through the design.
And that is some foreign concept to most people here. So let me explain what's going on here. Every time you make a change to a setting, the engine recalculates. That is one engine test. So automatic engine testing would at that point be turned off. So you could make all kinds of changes without you seeing any difference to the engine. Then you would have to go to the final tab and press test engine. And then it would spit out the new values. Mm-hmm. And you had 3 of those tests, or just 1, or 5. And that was really proper challenging because you had to know your game mechanics very well and your engines.
Yeah, it was extremely challenging at times, especially if you had a really complicated scenario that you were presented with. If you only had, say, 3 tests available, you really had to know your stuff, or you just completely fail out of the challenge and do pretty poorly in that regard. But the interesting thing that we're going to be doing with this is we're actually going to have a leaderboard for this. So you're going to be there's going to be an option to play not just multiplayer scenario challenges, but ranked multiplayer scenario challenges. So there will be someone on the top of that leaderboard at some point. Probably not me, probably not Killrob, because I think our skills have been massively exceeded by the community in recent years. But it will be a very challenging and very competitive and actually a lot of fun way to play automation.
And back in the day, I already... Because back in the day it was the biggest game, I was saying this is kind of the StarCraft of engine building. And it really played like this. It was super stressful and really fun. Also back in the day we already had some kind of ELO system for the ranking and worked pretty well. I've already worked it out for the new stuff as well. So that is going to be fun. Also, worth mentioning is that we already have the back end for multiplayer scenarios running. There is already the server kind of data exchange infrastructure and so on that's already seems to be in place and running, and we have connected players to each other and everything. So already a lot of work has been done for that backend to work once it's time to properly implement it.
So the other question is there going to be a casual multiplayer scene where 2 or more people can just make a car together? I don't believe we're going to be doing that, no. There's just too many difficult things that are going to be to actually make it so that 2 people can work on a car together.
Let me have the mouse, you bastard!
Twitch plays automation.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So the other question that's come in a few times, Rob, and it's maybe something we can touch on here, is that with the Ellisbury update, we're going to be adding in a new emission system.
Let me expand on that a little. I haven't done... let me see if I can grab the graphs for it. Where would I have put them?
So I can answer that in sort of very broad terms while Rob is bringing that up, but one of the things that we actually needed to build a proper emission system for the engines and automation was going through and actually building this new engine calculator, because obviously the emissions that an engine puts out are very dependent upon throttle settings, RPM, and also the air-fuel ratio, at the various, at that specific engine RPM and throttle setting. So we can actually, especially with everything we added in terms of combustion temperatures and air-fuel ratios and part throttle settings, we can actually build a relatively realistic system that takes into account sort of the 3 major pollutants that make up the emissions that cars put out, that being carbon monoxide, which is basically just incomplete combustion, same with unburned hydrocarbons, or nitrogen oxides, which is created by very high temperature combustion, typically by lean mixtures. CO2 emissions are already essentially modeled in automation because that's just a direct correlation between fuel efficiency and the horsepower you're making. But with this new system, we can actually properly simulate what a real life car would be putting out.
And I now have that on screen as well if you want to take a look.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much as Chris described there, the main interaction you will be seeing with this is probably the one that you see in this first graph that I'm highlighting at the moment there. That is that as you change your AFR ratios, and of course that now is a map, and part of that tune, the lower values for your tune, will likely be not really eco tune, but rather also emissions tuning. Because what you're going to run into is that depending on your... Is it actually... Do I have the graph here? No, I must have that in some research article or something. But what is happening is that catalytic converters really only work close to stoichiometric mixtures of fuel. So gone are the tuning possibilities there unless you're sacrificing emissions. And that slider for the AFR as well as your timing will be about pulling timing for emissions as well towards the one extreme, and that is tightly then linked to your AFR slider as well. And you can see the different dependencies here, that unburned fuel, HC, hydrocarbons, NOx basically at lean burn, because lean burn is hotter, is producing more NOx, and then as you... well, we're not even going there. Oh, right now? I mean, it drops off again at, towards lambda 1.2. So really, really lean burn. That is something that direct injection can do. Because then you're getting lower temperatures again because there's just less stuff to burn. There's not enough energy put into the system to produce high temperatures. So that's why it's falling off again. But yeah, you can see that hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide and stuff are quite varied across the range. And there are some sweet spots for you to see there. But you have to keep in mind with that catalytic converters really only work efficiently around a lambda of 1, that is stoichiometric. So yes, basically we're going to flesh out the system as a whole, that the emission stat is internally broken down into 3 components that are being tracked, and that is HC, NOx, and CO. And they have their dependencies, and that's pretty much it. We're probably going to be comparing those to the official guidelines for these values, as in there's some euro, some number and so on, that like standards that are being used. Your car is not allowed to have more than blah CO, and there are values for every one of these 3 in there. So we could use those and just compare to those. And in campaigns specifically, this might become important that, the government of Gazmir announces that from 1972, emission standard blah is enforced for new cars. And then you stand there with your 7-liter V8 and you're like, all right, guys, it was nice knowing you. This is going down the drain.
Or we can continue making that engine, but it's going to put out 130 horsepower now.
Yeah, or you just sell to Ahana where they don't care. But I think that is as much information as we currently have ourselves. So now you know it all. It's not more fleshed out than this, but this is one of my next big tasks that I have to flesh out the system, put all the dependencies, build a spreadsheet for it, have the programmers implement it, and then curse at it while it's broken in game, and then fix it up. And then it's probably at some point going out to you.
So a question came in is with regards to performance. With all these new calculations, how are we going to make sure that the performance doesn't degrade? Well, the answer to that is a lot of automation's calculations currently in Lua, which is quite slow, because essentially it's like, it's like kind of like a Russian nesting doll in which you have, a thing within inside a thing within inside a thing that is running something else. So if we can actually move a lot of this stuff to C++, we can realize gains in a lot of cases of, 2 to 3 orders of magnitude faster calculations, Rob?
Yeah, around a factor 100 in parts, yes.
Yeah, so by translating calculations from Lua to C++, we're effectively not losing anything. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we were able to do, with the 4.2 update, that major change to the engine calculations, because we're able to do like 100 times more work in the same amount of time that we were able to do the calculations before.
Yes, and that's exactly it. I think it came out in the end as probably either a little bit faster or a little bit slower than before, but we are now doing 100 times as many calculations as before. So there you see the power of making that step towards C++. And not all calculations become a factor 100 worse. Quite the contrary. They are usually becoming maybe 20%, maybe 10%, 20% worse. And we are putting them into C++, so we gain that factor of 50 to 100 on top of that. So, yeah.
And with regards to calculations, of course, seen a question talking about how things seem to just break down and we have all these little random database errors. Well, a lot of that has to do with the fact that there has been a major transition from Lua to C++, and occasionally you will go down, with whatever changes you're making, you'll go down a route where the game is expecting a Lua calculation and it's not there anymore, but it's there in C++. So it's going to be kind of a long process sorting these things out, but we are working on them. Question, of course, about are we going to get air-cooled engines in automation? And the answer to that is it's not really planned at the moment, no. And if we did bring it in, it's a lot more complicated than just making a whole bunch of new art, which actually for air-cooled engines would be really quite complicated with all the cooling fins, because air-cooled engines have a lot of different behavior to a water-cooled engine. Just in very broad terms, they don't perform very well on emissions because, of course, you can't really control the thermal expansion of the engine very well, so you're getting a lot of blow-by and oil burn and stuff. And they're louder than a water-cooled engine because, of course, you don't have the water cooling jackets to absorb the noise and vibrations. But, of course, they are lighter. So there would have to be a lot of work that goes into that and a lot of research that would go into that. And we just don't really have the time to go into doing that at the moment. Let's see here, further questions. A couple of questions about AI, Rob. If we could maybe talk about that and the effect that it's having on automation and what plans we have, if any, with regards to that.
AI in what context?
Just in general, are we planning on implementing any more than we already have? Our campaign mode actually essentially uses sort of a home-built AI in a lot of ways in terms of the sales model.
Yeah, basically it's a lookup table though. So it's not really an AI. It is basically the AI that builds the cars overnight. It builds the cars overnight and on one of our computers. Is doing so that it basically goes through a big lookup table for its company profile. Like what do I want to build, or how are the likelihoods that I'm going to build something? Then it rolls a dice and sees where it falls within those preferences, and then picks one there, like out of the top 3 or something of its desires, and then just goes ahead and says, yeah, okay, I'm going to build this one as my target demographic. And then once it's done and has built something nice, it is going to reuse that engine for another trim. And it's going to have a few number of trims. And that next trim is going to be focused on a demographic that has a lot of synergy with the one that it previously selected for the model as a target. So then again, it rolls a dice and sees like, okay, which one out of these that have nice synergies do I want to target? Builds that one. Uses the same engine, but a new variant for that engine. And it does so until it has a nicely fleshed out model with several trims. Then from there, it is going to the first facelift of all these. And basically does a revamp of all of them. Just updates them, builds them anew with the new tech it has to its proposal. And yeah, that's basically what the AI does. Then it saves it out into a database for when those cars are coming out and everything, with engineering times considered and all that. So it's basically a giant lookup with some random roles that make it slightly different. But at the point where you're starting the campaign, it already has picked its cars for the entire run. So we are not really going to go for any AI that is dynamically changing its mind during the campaign. So it's not going to directly react to you in terms of, oh, they have built this car, so we need to build this. It might do something along the lines of checking if something is profitable or has enough market share, and kind of cut the worst one and try to add a new one. That is something that it might be doing so that it looks like it's dynamic AI, but it won't be. So basically, there's no real need for AI there. We have good lookup tables, and so far we haven't had the need for anything fancy, really.
Yeah, I mean, we've essentially got what we need, and we don't really foresee a need to do anything beyond what we've already got. Quick question with regards to our art. When we get the new block types implemented in the Ellisbury update, will we be doing new art for the engine blocks?
I think the only thing that is... Well, the engine block art, I think, was it completely updated by Sergey already? Or is he still working on it? I think he's working on heads now, right?
I think he's kind of just shotgunning, whatever he feels like. Sort of, he works on heads, and then once he makes some good progress, then he'll go back to blocks and stuff.
Right.
We are in the process of redoing essentially all of the engine art and automation, and updating things and cleaning them up, and just generally making it look better. And I do believe that actually having different art for open versus closed deck engines is on the table at the moment.
Oh yeah, no, that is just a texture, so that's super simple. So yes, you are going to see the difference between closed deck and semi-open deck and open deck engines. Because it's not just open and closed. We do have an in-between as well. And that's
Yes.
literally just one texture that goes on top of the engine block. So it's like, yeah, that's pretty trivial. And yes, that is going to happen.
And with regards to the art, I don't think we have any more valve cover variants planned, but that's also something that we've actually opened up modding for. So 3D modelers can actually go make those now on their own. Let's see here. I think we're getting close to the end of the stream here. We might just answer 2 or 3 more questions, and we will call it a day. So if anybody has any, go ahead and ask them now. Do we have plans for heavy-duty vehicles, aka duallies or twin rear axles? No, that's not going to happen.
Not in Automation 1.0 at least, so no.
So the question is, if the designer is considered feature complete after the Supercharger update, will we be getting a DLC for additional suspension types after the final release if we decide that there is a need for that?
Well, yeah, first there needs to be a need for that, which is highly unlikely, having seen what we have seen so far. I mean, the new suspension types don't just spring up. The dad jokes. Spring up like this. So, I mean, swing axle and so on has been suggested. There are some decent suggestions out there and why, and somewhat solid arguments for why they should be there and whatnot. They are being considered, of course, but we are not going to go beyond 7 choices for that list. So it needs to be the 7 most relevant ones. And I think there are some solid suggestions coming for the solid axle type, where really the spring itself, so leaf or coil, should be a spring choice in the trim and not as the main type that you're selecting. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that would free up one slot there that we could use. And maybe that's the type that you're looking for, but we'll keep that open. But there will definitely not be DLC or anything specific bigger for that. If we add it, then we just add it. And it would likely be in 4.3, like the overarching, the Supercharger update. One of those 3 updates, as we do want to be feature complete with that. And a suspension type is a pretty big thing, because it needs to be updated into all AI, or our AIs that need to build cars and so on, into the lookup tables and so on. And yeah, it needs to be used. So yeah, that's basically our stance on that.
Plus, it also needs all new art being made too, so it's a fairly involved process making a new suspension type.
Oh yeah, and then export as well.
So we could make a whole bunch of new suspension types and watch poor Infinity pull his hair out once again, trying to get them all to export properly. What was the final couple questions here? We had a question about tow in and tow out. Is that coming to exported cars? Not only is it coming to exported cars, it's actually going to be in base automation. So that is a change that's coming very soon.
Yes, and that's one of the main reasons why choosing tow is the way to go, because exports are kind of twitchy sometimes, right? So yeah, that's one of the ways to address those.
Or sometimes not enough. So that's going to give you a lot of ways to make your exported cars drive a whole lot better.
There were no questions for the Ellisbury track, my baby. But
I know I'm a little disappointed about that too,
yeah.
Because it's going to be pretty spectacular. Rob and I have been putting in a fair bit of work, along with actually Cone Dodger has joined us on this to sort of suss out some of the details on this. So it's going to be a really cool set of tracks. I think you guys are really going to enjoy what we've come up with. It's pretty cool stuff.
I'm so looking forward to the track actually zooming in into the action instead of just seeing it in this tiny little frame and not following your car at all, and it's just being a little blip, the same red car always. And now it's going to be the actual car taking a photo from the top, and you zoom into the action. Also, depending on speed and whatnot, it can be zoomed, and that will feel so much better.
And with that, I mean, there's going to be an entirely new standalone track editor, which is based on the preliminary stuff that Mac has already showed us internally. It's going to be quite easy to use and fairly intuitive, so you're going to be able to build some pretty cool tracks in a very short amount of time without having to fuss around with that crazy old janky community tool to build the automation tracks that you see on the automation forums in the track download section. So there's going to be some very cool possibilities come out with that, and just the fact that we're actually using big textures now instead of just the 1280 by 720 image of the track, it's going to open up a whole lot of possibilities. It's going to completely change how the track testing looks and feels and everything. It's actually going to feel very, very, well, I'm not going to say realistic, but it's going to feel very intense.
So the only downside to community modding there is that you need some actual skills to make tracks then, in terms of the artwork. The race line definitions are really easy to make very nice and good. With the it's completely spline based now, and you can, just like any other spline editing tool, you have two handles and can draw on them and just change the angle and whatnot very, very easily and make it perfect. But then the artwork is 8K times 8K, so 8192 times 8192 pixels for the background image. And that is a challenge to make nice and detailed looking.
Question is, will this new track editor be able to handle large size tracks like the Nordschleife?
Yeah, no problem. It's just you set the scale of it in the editor. And one thing that is important as well that we are changing, because the Nordschleife never really properly worked in automation, because it was basically doing something like you click the button, you go and drink a tea or take a dump, and then you come back and then you hear the motor start, right? So that was not the best experience. What we are going to do now is to basically run the calculations in real time and only looking forward as much as you need. So, and only as you stop the calculation to see your final time, is it calculating the rest of the lap in the background. So it is going to start instantly and get you into the action. And then if you still want to abort it, then that's fine. You can do so, and it will just take as long as previously, but not really, because we are porting everything of that, which currently is in Lua, to C++. So it is going to be a lot faster.
Yes. That'll be quite helpful for people who are designing really, really long tracks. Two other questions with regards to the track builder. First one is, and I can actually answer this one, is will the Ellisbury track be made available in BeamNG? The answer to that is they are aware of the track, and they are very interested, based on the art that we've seen, of actually maybe making it into a BeamNG track. But as we discussed before, they are crazy busy over the next 18 months, so I wouldn't expect it anytime soon.
Yes, if they make a big new track, then the Ellisbury one is definitely in the cards, I think you could say, if that ever comes to show.
And the other question is, will the existing tracks that we have right now, will they run in a legacy mode in the track builder, the new track builder?
That remains to be seen. If we can make them work without putting in a lot of effort, then yes. The track editor itself, the new tool that Mac is making, the standalone one, does handle, and I think that was a question here as well. Yes, Sensei asked that. It does work with smaller images that are then upscaled to 8K. And they are being saved out as 8K. So no, you don't get around much smaller track sizes, but okay, if you take a small image and then upscale it to 8K, then of course the file size will be quite a bit smaller, because you have massive pixels. You have now 10 by 10 pixel size, or something like that. But you won't get around the 8K, because that is going to be integral to how everything is working for the new tracks. But yes, the track files are about-ish 100 megabytes in size per track.
Okay. Well, I think that's probably all the questions we're going to answer today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We've got some really good questions, and hope we were able to answer most of what you had to ask. I don't know if we have any closing thoughts here, Rob, before we sign off for the day.
Not really, apart from thanks for waiting, as always, in terms of for the next update. And it is going to be a fair amount of more waiting until you finally get all these changes in your hand. But even for the Ellisbury update, it's going to be pretty massive in terms of changes, and very much worth the wait. So,
Yep.
But from now on, you should be seeing more frequent updates on what is actually going on as we have approached more implemented features in playable, somewhat playable versions. And yeah, we're about, I would say, 50 to 60% through at the moment.
Yeah, we've been head down for the last few months just because there's been so much stuff to do and not really a whole lot to show other than just piles and piles of numbers, which are interesting to a point, but can't really make a little dev update about that without actually having real content to show. So there's going to be more information and more of that coming again in the days and weeks and months to come. In terms of timelines, we haven't actually worked out when the Ellisbury update is going to drop, but I can say conclusively that it's not going to be as long between the 4.1 update and 4.2 update as between the 4.2 update and when the Ellisbury update drops. So we're not going to make you wait for 16 months again.
All right, let's wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for showing up and asking questions, and I shall see you guys next time.